Hello and welcome to this video cast for subscribers to davidicke.com. Well, one picture has dominated the news this week of a little 3-year-old boy from Syria who was pictured lying dead on a beach after an attempt by his family to flee Syria and the horrors that have been going on there. His brother and his mother died also in the attempt to escape the Syrian civil war, the Syrian proxy war by the United States and European countries. The picture, understandably, created and generated a wave of emotional response. And that's understandable. It's amazing how many words can be spoken, how many things can be seen in a single, simple photograph. But for those who have turned their attention to this as a result of the photograph, they should remember that dead little boys and children and dead civilians are the norm in the Middle East. They have died in their extraordinary numbers since the invasion of Iraq and the proxy war against Syria. The bombing of civilians to protect them from violence in Libya, and the creation by the West of this ISIS bunch of lunatics who have created such devastation in the countries from which so many people now seek to flee into Europe. The picture of one little boy should not let us lose that fact of how many lost little boys and girls there have been in this systematic devastation of a whole region of people. And you know, I'm sick and tired of the fricking bullshit. Do you know, we have a prime minister in this country, David Cameron, who actually said this week that the answer to the enormous and gathering numbers of people heading into Europe from Syria and other parts of the Middle East, the answer is to bring peace and stability to Syria. It's difficult to comprehend the scale of sheer mendacious hypocrisy that is necessary for that man to summon those words. But then I guess when you're a professional liar, by definition of your job, then it's easier for him than for most other people. Look at the definitions for psychopath, and you'll see the personality makeup of world leaders, including Cameron. Is that a coincidence? You're having a laugh. psychopaths are needed in power because those behind those in power require psychopathic behavior to advance the hidden agenda. And that agenda I'm going to address in the videocast today. Cameron and Obama, I say Cameron and Obama, I could say Blair and Bush. They apparently are in different parties, but it doesn't matter because the same hidden hand is behind them all. This is why the agenda never changes. This party replaces that party, agenda doesn't change. Obama replaces Bush. I'm about change, nothing changes. The agenda goes on. And what has happened, not just involving Cameron and Obama, but other countries too, more in the background, is that they have systematically, coldly, calculatedly armed, funded and trained rebels to remove Gaddafi in Libya and set that country afire with violence, upheaval. And they have then done the same in their ongoing quest to remove Assad in Syria. And we now have America bombing Syria. We have Turkey bombing Syria. And we have a man who said this week that the answer to the migrant crisis is bringing peace and stability to Syria, who has had one go at getting the British Parliament to support British bombing of Syria, and he's waiting now to have another go as soon as he can. And saying even that if a leader of the Labour opposition party came to win their leadership election, currently going on, and was against bombing in Syria, he might even do it anyway. The words are the bullshit. The words are the cover story. The actions are the agenda they've been following year after year after year. I've been waiting for this migrant crisis to happen because it is all part of the agenda that I've been uncovering and communicating for more than 20 years. In fact, 25 years now. And the reason for it, there are many reasons for it. I'll give you two reasons for it. What this hidden hand wants is chaos. Because chaos and upheaval is the easiest state in the world to manipulate. Because once you have chaos, you have not just the opportunity to offer the solution to the chaos, i.e. advancing your agenda with the chaos as the excuse, but because of the chaos, you've got vast numbers of people sickened by the chaos, in fear of the chaos, who are demanding that you offer a solution to the chaos. And so when you say, oh, we want to do this, more centralization of power, more surveillance, more police state, then you say, well, we don't really want that, but we've got to sort this chaos out. So yeah, all right, go, do it. or at least the opposition to it, is massively diluted. So this wave of migrants from the Middle East and Africa who are heading into Europe is designed to create chaos, and you see nothing yet if their agenda is allowed to unfold. Because what they want is a tidal wave, never mind a wave, a tidal wave of people heading into Europe, creating economic chaos and, of course, creating conflict between migrants and the home population. And in this way, as usual, you have one set of victims of this hidden hand played off against another set of victims of this hidden hand. So they're fighting and in conflict with each other, and the hidden hand's going, oh, thank you very much, that's good, yeah, oh, that's nice, yeah, oh yeah, more, yeah. That's what we're seeing. And there's another reason, like I say, there are many. There has been a war on the nation state for decades and decades and decades and decades. The European Union is a war on the nation state. So are these other unions that are being brought into place outside of public attention to be their versions of the European Union all around the world. And one of the great sources of resistance to the absorption of the nation state into these super fascist communist groupings with centralized bureaucratic dictatorships. Ooh, did I mention the European Union? One of the great sources of resistance to that is a sense of national identity. Now, let me say from the start, I'm not a nationalist. I had to be born on a piece of land, otherwise I would have drowned. I was actually born on a piece of land called Britain or England, which was called many other names in the past. I love the English countryside. I love much of the English culture, but I don't believe in England's the best and stand up for England and I'm English. No, your infinite awareness having an experience as an English person or a French person. That's what it is. Get caught in the experience thinking it's you. Anyway, that's another story. So I'm not a nationalist. I'm not a flag waver. If I ever stood up for the national anthem, I think I would genetically implode, given my views of that stuff. So I'm coming from the point of view of simple facts. There is a great resistance to the end of the nation state from people who have a self-identity with the nation state. And to dilute that, the migration, not just into Europe, but also into the United States, is to break down that sense of what the nation means, and therefore dilute that resistance to the end of the nation state. So like I say, there are lots and lots of reasons for this, but there are two of the big ones. And to understand what's happening in the world, as I've said year after year after year, people must stop seeing every event in isolation, because that's not how it is. If you got, where they set up all those dominoes on the floor, if you knock the first domino, it hits the second domino, third domino, fourth domino, goes all around the room until it knocks over the last domino. Now, if you stand there in myopia, just focusing on one domino, wherever it is in the line, you'll see a domino fall over. Maybe just hitting another one. But you won't see all the dominoes that have hit each other to make that one fall. And so to understand the migrant crisis, we have to connect some dots, because this is part of a long process of creating chaos to justify dramatic global change. So let's go back to, you go back much, much further, as I do in the books. My goodness me, you can go way back. But let's pick it up in the year 2000, when a group called the Project for the New American Century, made up of Bush-backing Republicans, but don't let's get confused by parties, they're just names for the same face. And they produced a document which called for a list of countries to be regime changed in multiple theatre wars by the American military. These countries were Libya, Syria, Iraq, on and on, all the ones that have been involved since. This group of people, which included people like Rumsfeld and Cheney and Wolfowitz, stalwarts of the Bush administration, they came to power a few months after that document was published. And the document also said that to achieve this end of all these regime changes with war and what have you, they would need what they called a new Pearl Harbor, an attack on American soil to justify what they wanted. In the same year that they came to power in the Bush administration, we had 9/11, the official story of which is a fairy tale and remains unproperly investigated by the mainstream media, because the mainstream media in effect tell you what the system wants you to hear and call it journalism. So as a result of 9/11, they had their excuse to go into Afghanistan, into Iraq, and start this so-called war on terror. And the Al-Qaeda at that time, terrorists that they were saying justified this, bin Laden and etc., were actually the creation of the American government and the American military. So, as a result of that, you had these countries targeted one after the other. And of course, there's the television interview with General Wesley Clark, who said that immediately after 9/11, he was told by one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon that they were going to invade Iraq. Why? There seemed no point. Well, any connection to 9/11? Well, no, but we're going to invade them. This is immediately after 9/11. And then a few weeks later, he said he came back, talked to the same general, and was told, actually, there's a list of countries that we're now going to invade. And they were straight off the pages of the document of the Project for the New American Century: Libya, Iraq, and so on. Syria. And so they, for different excuses, different made-up reasons, targeted Iraq and Syria and Libya, with knock-on effects to places like Lebanon, which was also on the list. And of course, let's just think about it just for a second. If you are going to directly bomb or indirectly bomb through your funded, trained and armed rebels, country after country in the Middle East, under the ludicrous smokescreen of a Arab Spring, yeah, tell the people in that area of the world there's been a people's revolution. But if you're going to do that, what's going to happen? You're obviously going to create fantastic numbers of refugees and dispossessed people? Are they going to head down into Africa, which is also being torn asunder, not least economically, by the same hidden hand? No, no. They're going to try to head north into Europe, looking for safety and some kind of economic opportunity. We're back to the dominoes. Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, migration crisis. And if you don't connect the dots to see how they fit together, you'll never get a picture of what's really happening. And isn't it extraordinary? Well, it's extraordinary to me. On one level, it's extraordinary coming from the point of view of journalism, but coming from the point of view of the way the media works, it's not extraordinary at all. I'm yet to hear anyone question Cameron about the cause and effect of his support and desire for more now bombing of Syria. Question his support and advocacy for bombing in the Middle East with the effect of the migrant crisis. And the idea is that with this great influx of migrants comes conflict, comes upheaval, and then there's the next bonus for the hidden hand as it ticks off its wish list. And that's justifying the imposition of a fiercer and fiercer police state to deal with the upheaval and violence. And I can hear it already. Well, you see, all these migrants have come in, and some of them are from ISIS, and therefore they're in our midst. So we've got to have all this surveillance and control, and because we got to protect you. Predictable is possible to be predictable. And you remember, if you live in Britain anyway, in 2009, story broke, which here's one version of it. Labour, this is the Tony Blair Labour Party, see David Cameron Conservative Party, different masks on the same hidden face. Labour wanted mass immigration to make UK a different society, basically, to change British society forever. This is according to a former advisor to the party. Labour threw open Britain's borders to mass immigration to help socially engineer a truly multicultural society, former government advisor reveals. The huge increases in migrants over the last decade were partly due to a politically motivated attempt by ministers to radically change the country, according to Andrew Nether, a former advisor to Tony Blair and two of his ministers, Jack Straw and David Blunkett. Blair and Straw were bosom buddies in the lies that were justifying the invasion of Iraq, weapons of mass destruction and all that. The advisor said Labour's relaxation of controls on immigration was a deliberate plan to open up the UK to mass immigration, but that ministers were nervous and reluctant to discuss such a move publicly for fear it would alienate its core working class vote. This is the hidden hand at work via these puppet politicians, some of which know what's going on, or a lot of it, like Blair, some of which don't. But do it because that's the politically expedient thing for them at the time. So you have a situation where this advisor is saying that the gates were opened to massive immigration into Britain, not to help the immigrants, again, they couldn't give a damn about them, but to change British society irreversibly. as a result, the public argument for immigration concentrated instead on the economic benefits and the need for more migrants. We had this all the time. Oh, well, the economy needs migrants to fill the jobs that British people don't want to do. All freaking lies, basically. There'd be some truth in that, but it was a cover story overwhelmingly to cover the fact that it was being done to change British society. And what we're seeing now with the mass immigration of these tragic people from these war-torn countries, thanks to the West, Britain and America especially, is that that is being advanced on a European-wide scale, not least at the moment in Germany. So Mr. Nether, speechwriter who worked for Blair, has pointed out that this was all done systematically. And the article says, critics said the revelations showed a conspiracy. Ooh, can't use that word, you're a conspiracy theorist. Critics said the revelation showed a conspiracy within government to impose mass immigration for cynical political reasons. And that is what is happening on a European-wide scale, and it's also happening in places like the United States. That is not to attack the migrants and the immigrants, although like everywhere else in the world there'll be some deeply unpleasant people among them, but vast numbers of those people will be in desperate straits and in need of help because of a situation that the West has systematically created. And it was a deliberate policy, he said, from late 2000 to open up the UK to mass migration. Some 2.3 million migrants have been added to the population since then, according to Whitehall estimates. Quietly slipped out, of course, last month. So Andrew Green, chairman of Migration Watch think tank, said, now at least the truth is out and it's dynamite. Many have long suspected that mass immigration under Labour was not just a cock-up, but also a conspiracy. They were right. Now remember, this article was from 2009. And he says under Labour, but of course it doesn't matter what party you're dealing with because they're following the same agenda. So if we're going to understand what this whole thing is about and how it fits in, and we've got to connect some dots, and you have to look into this hidden web of secret societies and semi-secret groups. Actually, secret group at one time, the Bilderberg group, but because of alternative researchers, they've been pulled into the role now of a semi-secret group. We know of their existence, but we don't know what they are deciding in detail, except that which is leaked. And the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, these groupings that are think tanks that orchestrate the policy decided deep in the shadows, orchestrate its implementation in the world of the scene, the public arena. And when I was talking last week about international Zionism, I was talking about an organization called the Round Table, a secret society started in the late 19th century, headed first of all by the Rothschilds frontman Cecil Rhodes, and it was the Round Table that created these groups like the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Bilderberg Group. What they are doing is putting into positions of power to implement this hidden agenda those that represent this network, which brings me to the extraordinary coincidence. When you research this stuff, coincidences are, to a penny. Peter D. Sutherland, an Irish bloke, is the United Nations Special Representative of the Secretary General for International migration. Going back to And the Truth Shall Set You Free, quite a long time ago now, the prophetic book, as it's turned out, deeply prophetic book, that is actually being read on the television news now and written in the newspapers, not quoting the book, but by the events that the book said this is the plan that are now happening. And Peter D. Sutherland has many, many mentions in And the Truth Shall Set You Free. And now he is Special Representative, United Nations for International Migration, at the time when this migration crisis is now going into a whole new stage. Here's some background to him. He was Attorney General of Ireland, a commissioner with the European Community as it then was, and he is an absolute fanatical promoter of a centralized control of Europe. He was Director General of GATT, which became the World Trade Organization, which he was also head of. The World Trade Organization is a Rothschild-Rockefeller group, like the World Health Organization, to centrally dictate policy in their areas. And of course, dictating trade policy gives you enormous control over what happens to the global economy. You say, don't you, that you can judge people by their friends? Well, he's currently chairman of Goldman Sachs International, so he must be a really nice man. And he's chairman of the London School of Economics, which I've talked about in another book, Human Race Get Off Your Knees, the number of people from this web that go through the London School of Economics, and not just from Britain, but from the United States as well, including the Rockefellers. And this guy, Sutherland, was a member of the UN Commission on Human Security and serves as chairman of BP. He was a director of the Royal Bank of Scotland Group until he was asked to leave the board when it was taken over by the government to avoid bankruptcy. And here we go. He is on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group. He's an honorary chairman of the Trilateral Commission. He was chairman of the Trilateral Commission Europe and was vice chairman of the European Roundtable of Industrialists, which is another group that locks into this roundtable network. And he's honorary president of the European Movement Ireland. I wonder how many members that's got, given what European involvement and European Union involvement has done to the country of Ireland. Now, here is a man, he's United Nations Special Representative for International Migration at a time when this great wave of migration is coming and designed to be a tidal wave eventually. Here is his policy on migration. Sutherland strongly advocates liberal immigration policies and mass immigration into the European Union. Well, he must be getting the gin out then, at the moment. Sutherland gave his opinion to the UK's Lords Home Affairs Committee on the 21st of June 2012 as being that at the most basic level, individuals should have freedom of choice about working and studying in other countries, and that the EU states should stop targeting highly skilled migrants and conversely placing restrictions on low-skilled migrants. Now, this web that Sutherland represents, probably in the list of things at least once, in the list of things it would list as its worst nightmare, is any form of human freedom, because that's not what it's about. So here we have more bullshit. Tell them what they want to hear, and then let's do what we were going to do anyway. So, Sutherland also argues that migration is a crucial dynamic for economic growth. Here we are. This is the Blair excuse. And that this is the case, however difficult it may be to explain this to the citizens of those states. We're back to keep quiet what the reason really is and tell them it's about economics. Sutherland's stated opinions on policy were that it was a fundamentally important policy for states to cooperate on migration policy rather than developing their own policies in isolation, as no state is or can be an island. integrate, 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 end of the nation state. Another thing I came across this week was a short comment by Gilad Azmon. Gilad was born into a Jewish family in Israel, and then as he gained experience and had to join the Israeli army, he realized the truth, and he's been a tremendous critic and challenger of Israeli policy ever since. And he said this week in some comments headed, "Refugees should seek refuge in synagogues." Yesterday, he says, Germany turned on Britain over the migrant crisis because, if for people around the world, the pressure is for Britain to take more of these migrants. Germany expects to accept 800,000 asylum seekers by the end of the year. Britain is also preparing for the growing refugee disaster. It's closed its gates. You'll see them gradually open. The German call makes some sense, I must admit, says Gilad. After all, it was Tony Blair and his Labour government that launched the criminal war that has led to this global humanitarian crisis. But Blair wasn't alone. In fact, he's what Gilad calls merely a Savos Goy. When Blair took Britain into Iraq, his chief fundraisers were Lord Levy of the Labour Friends of Israel and Jewish Chronicle writers David Aronovich and Nick Cohen were the prime advocates for the immoral interventionist wars in the British media and beyond in terms of support and promotion. Since then, we've seen, he says, the Jewish lobby openly pushing for more and more wars, Syria, Iran, Libya, etc. In France, it was the CRIF and Bernard Henry Levy that pushed for the intervention in Libya that has turned the Mediterranean Sea into a death trap. These are other points that are not being made in the mainstream media for obvious reasons, if you read the books. I don't know how many refugees Lord Levy, Bernard Henry Levy and David Aronovich can fit into the spare rooms, but I do believe that the Jewish community should immediately place itself at the forefront of any humanitarian effort for the refugees. First, Jews claim to know more than anyone else about suffering, but mainly because it was Jewish aggressive politics and Zionist global lobbying that brought this colossal refugee crisis about. Absolutely. And why is this not being said in the mainstream media? You hear some banging, by the way. The people upstairs, I think they're rebuilding their flat because it's been going on for a month now. And you try to get this done while they're not banging, but there you go. We'll have to deal with it, I suppose. So, dot connections. Let's start looking at the wider picture, because the immigration crisis is part of a whole agenda for the total transformation of human society. And one of the excuses being used is that because of global warming, which of course when temperatures stopped rising a long time ago, morphed into human-caused climate change, is one of the major reasons, because they use words like sustainability. Society must be sustainable. Now, of course, that sounds fine, like it always does when these people are selling a nightmare. But sustainability is not to them what it means to other people, like not taking more than you can replace. Sustainability to them is an excuse to transform human society. And it came out of this whole global warming thing, came out originally from a group called the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome just happens to be one of the satellite groups in the Trilateral Commission Bilderberg Group Roundtable Network. And here's a quote from 1991 and the publication of a Club of Rome document called The First Global Revolution, a report by the Council of the Club of Rome. And this is what it said. In searching for a common enemy against whom we can unite, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. Uniting people behind a common threat. This is the classic hidden hand mass manipulation. In their totality and their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat which must be confronted by everyone together. And of course, part of this whole thing is we must not use fossil fuels for energy. But the people that are ultimately behind the Club of Rome are the same people who systematically suppress technology, which was shown to work long time ago by the great Nikola Tesla, that accesses electrical and electromagnetic fields and sources in the atmosphere and turns them into usable warmth and power with no effect in terms of fossil fuels. And once the technology is in place, no bills either. So it's all a scam. It's not about protecting the environment. It's about advancing this agenda. Now, of course, the environment is a wonderful excuse to do anything you like, because what is the definition of the environment? It's everything and everywhere. So once you say we are imposing environmental policies, what you get is the free rein to change anything, because everything in effect is the environment. Now, a key part of this, although it's being superseded now, as I'll get to as we go along, is something called Agenda 21. Agenda 21, Agenda for the 21st Century. It was signed into agreement at the 1992 Earth Summit in Brazil, when the green movement was manipulated into supporting global human slavery, because that's what the whole thing was designed to trigger. And the Agenda 21 society is one that is, if you like, well, using their own terms, it is a post-industrial, post-democratic society. And it was headed, the 1992 Earth Summit in Brazil, was headed by a Canadian oil billionaire and business billionaire called Maurice Strong. Maurice Strong was a member of the Club of Rome and also a frontman and clone for the Rockefeller family, which means he was a frontman and clone for the Rothschild family. And this is a man who, of course, made his fortune from industrialization. And here's a quote from him at the 1992 Earth Summit. "Isn't the only hope for this planet that the industrialized civilization collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about?" And that's what we're seeing step by step unfolding. Now, Agenda 21 uses terms like sustainable development and biodiversity, which all sound great, and in their true meaning, who wouldn't support that except an idiot? But that's not what they mean. They're there to provide excuses. This is the wish list gleaned from their own documents of Agenda 21. An end to national sovereignty. Here we go. This is a constantly recurring theme. You've got to get rid of national sovereignty and identity so you can centralize power eventually in a world government, world central bank, world army, world currency, cash, no physical money. And so the national identity has to be destroyed, and that's why this is such a major part of what's happening with the migration crisis. Another on the wish list of Agenda 21. State planning and management of all land resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, mountains, oceans and fresh water, agriculture, rural development, biotechnology and ensuring equity, which means equal slavery. And so all these things, state planning and management of all land resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, mountains, oceans and fresh water, that agriculture, rural development, biotechnology, that means control by the state, global state, of all those things. And there be no private ownership or decision making involved in any of those things. And of course, if you control water and food, you control the global population. And we're now having situations in American states where they are saying that they own, the state owns all water supplies, even, and I'm not joking, even down to puddles on your own property. But will the mainstream media tell you this? Another one, the state to define the role of business and financial resources. In other words, they're going to control business and they're going to control the global financial structure through this world central bank. Abolition of private property because it's not sustainable. Control by the state on every level. Restructuring the family unit. And that is a constant in all these different documents, the end of the family unit, because they want control of all children from birth. If you read things like Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, published in 1932, you will see that is laid out in terms of the state control of children. Now, what's the next one on the list? Children raised by the state. And that is why we are seeing phenomenal numbers of children, not just in Britain and America, but elsewhere, being taken from loving parents and put into care and forcibly adopted by social services and child protection on the most spurious, ludicrous reasons that you could imagine to justify those children being taken away. People told what their job will be. That is, again, complete control of human society. Major restrictions on movement, and we're seeing this in terms of how it's being more and more difficult to get around because of this increasing national security. Creation of human settlement zones. The human settlement zones are supposed to be highly concentrated, mass populated cities of high-rise buildings eventually. And most of the rest of the land in places like America denied to human occupation. And if you go on the internet and you put into a image search engine words like biodiversity, wildlands project, map of America, you'll see the vast, enormous tracts of America that are designed to have no human use, and how the human settlement zones are in very, very small areas. And of course, once you're in a human settlement zone and out of the wider countryside, you are easy to track, you are easy to keep surveillance on, you are easy to control. And that is the idea. Mass resettlement as people are forced to vacate land where they currently live. All part of this, moving people into these human settlement zones. They're clearing the land in various ways, and that's a major reason, in fact the key reason, why they are targeting small farmers, not least again in America, with regulations and financial problems that force them off the land, and other reasons too, which I talk about in the book. Dumbing down of education. Well, that's already achieved on a massive scale, because the last thing that any full-blown tyranny wants is a population of people who are informed and aware of anything. Mass global depopulation in pursuit of all the above, and I go into that in detail in the books. And of course, if you're going to take people off massive amounts of land and put them in these human settlement zones, then mass global depopulation is an essential, because you're not going to have the room for the people that are here now. Okay, now I mentioned a few minutes ago that the Agenda 21 is being superseded as they go to the next stage, and it's called the 2030 Agenda, getting even more specific now. And the headline of this report by a guy called Michael Schneider says, this month the UN launches a blueprint for a new world order with the help of the Pope. Of course, the Roman Church is all part of this, this web I'm talking about. Did you know, the article says, that the UN is planning to launch a new universal agenda for humanity in September 2015. The phrase does not come from me, he says. It is actually right in the first paragraph of the official document that every UN member nation will formally approve at a conference later this month. The entire planet is going to be committing to work towards 17 sustainable development goals and 169 specific sustainable development targets. And yet there has been almost a total media blackout about this here in the United States, well, here in Britain and probably everywhere else as well. The UN document promises that this plan will transform our world for the better by 2030, and yet very few Americans have even heard of the 2030 agenda at this point. Most of them, including people in Britain and elsewhere, have not even heard about Agenda 21, even though there are Agenda 21 operations going on in communities, towns and cities all over the bloody world. It says that instead, most of us seem to be totally obsessed with the latest celebrity gossip or the latest nasty insults that our public politicians have been throwing around at one another. This is all the diversion. Get them looking that way so we can do what we want over here. It absolutely amazes me, the writer says, that more people cannot understand that Agenda 2030 is a really, really big deal. When will people start waking up? Well, they'll start waking up when they know that Agenda 2030 exists and they can start to see its significance, and that means communicating information. But you can only do that through the alternative media, because the mainstream media won't touch it, or if they do touch it, they will present it in a very positive way. The Agenda 2030 is taking the principles and goals laid out in Agenda 21 to an entirely new level. Agenda 21 was primarily focused on the environment, but the 2030 agenda addresses virtually all areas of human activity. It's truly a blueprint for global governance. Of course, global governance, world government, dictatorship, dictating to every other person on the planet. And later this month, nearly every nation on the entire planet is going to be signing up for this new agenda. The general population is going to be told that this agenda is voluntary. Well, that's what they've said about many other things that have been compulsory. And that it's all about ending poverty and, here we go, fighting climate change. But that is not the full story. Absolutely right, it's not. Unfortunately, there is so much positive spin around this plan that most people will not be able to see through it. Just check out an excerpt from a piece that was published on the official UN website yesterday being this week. The United Nations General Assembly today approved a resolution sending the draft 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development to member states for adoption later this month, bringing the international community to the cusp of decisions that can help realize the dream of a world peace and dignity for all, according to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. I do say Ban Ki-moon. I think they ought to. Today is the start of a new era, the announcement says. We have travelled a long way together to reach this turning point, declared Mr. Ban. Yeah, we have not travelled a long way together. They have travelled a long way in pushing their agenda and keeping it from us so we can't be together and have an opinion on it, i.e. ban and all that. And what he was doing was, he says, recounting the path to the international community, elite, has taken over the 15 years since the adoption of the landmark Millennium Development Goals towards crafting a new set of post-2015 sustainability goals, global control, that will aim to ensure the long-term well-being of our planet and its people, brackets, inversion. With world leaders expected to adopt the text at a 25 to 27 September summit in New York, the UN chief said Agenda 2030 aims high, seeks to put people at the centre of development. Yeah, put the people there, we've got to control them, that's the centre of our development, right? Foster human well-being, well, prosperity, peace and justice on a healthy planet, and pursue respect for the human rights of all people and gender equality and all the other bollocks they talk about to hide the fact that it's all about control. Because what it is a mind control job. They give you loads of things that you go, yes, that's good, yes, that's good, that's that good, yes, that good. And you get into this mode of yes, that's good for anything that they're announcing in these things. And then they throw the bullets in and the bombs in. Tell them what they want to hear and sell them their worst nightmare. I've made a note here. And that's what it's all about. Telling them what they want to hear, telling us what we want to hear, and then selling us our worst nightmare. Now, this is from the preamble of the official 2030 Agenda document. This agenda is a plan of action for people, planet and prosperity. It also seeks to strengthen universal peace in larger freedom. No, it doesn't. We recognise that eradicating poverty in all its forms, dimensions, including extreme poverty, is the greatest global challenge and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. All these are cover stories and cover explanations for control and imposition of lifestyle. All countries and all stakeholders acting in collaborative partnership will implement this plan. No, the hidden hand will implement this plan in the way it really means through this web that I was mentioning earlier. We are resolved to free the human race from the tyranny of poverty. Well, you're not. Well, we're very close to the point where 1% of the world population will own 50% of the wealth. It's all nonsense. And we want to heal and secure our planet. We are determined to take the bold and transformative steps which are urgently needed to shift the world into a sustainable and resilient path. Shift the world into centralized tyrannical control. We embark on this collective journey as we pledge that no one will be left behind. What absolute baloney. And these are 17 sustainable development goals and 169 targets as well. But there's 17 Sustainable Development Goals that they've announced to demonstrate the scale and ambition of the new universal agenda. 1. End poverty in all its forms everywhere. They're not even going to start to try to do that. End hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. Sustainable agriculture, that is code for genetically modified food. Ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. That's why alternative practitioners and access to nutrition is being deleted, so that the only alternatives are big pharma, drugs and potions. Ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Program the population with your version of reality. Achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Get women and girls to support this, believing it is about equality for them when they couldn't give a damn. Ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Control all water supplies. That's in other documents. Control the water, you control the people. Ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all. No way that they want energy for all. And sustainable means our version of energy. And controlling energy and energy consumption via things like smart meters, which are just surveillance devices in your own home and business. Promote sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment and decent work for all. Control business and tell people where they're going to work. It's from Agenda 21. Build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization and foster innovation. Sustainable industrialization means deindustrialization. Reduce inequality with and among countries. Last thing they want. Otherwise there's no elite. Make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable. These are the human settlement zones they're talking about. Sustainable surveillance, sustainable control. Ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Dictate lifestyles. Dictate people's lives, dictate people's choices. Take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. Use that as an excuse to transform society. Conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas and marine resources for sustainable development. Control the oceans, control the seas and control all marine life and access to it. Protect, restore and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. Control the manage forests means control the forests, own the forests, and the rest of it means take over the land and dictate what happens to it, i.e. we're removing people from it into the human settlement zones in using the excuse of protecting the environment. Promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable and inclusive institutions at all levels. Institutions are the elements of the control system. And promoting peaceful societies, in other words, we're going to have a police state. So the people will have to be peaceful, but the police state's not going to be. Finally, 17, strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Strengthen the means of implementation. Impose global control through a world government and agencies going down into even local communities, imposing the will to implement all this in its true sense, not the way they're describing it. This article says Patrick Wood, an economist and author of Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation, says it's clear that the UN and its supporters see sustainable development as more than just the way to a cleaner environment. I don't even see that. They see it as the vehicle for creating a long-sought new international economic order or new world order. Wood's new book traces the modern technocracy movement to Zbigniew Brzezinski. I do that in my own books. David Rockefeller and the Trilateral Commission in the early 1970s. Trilateral Commission again, you see. And he says the environment is a perfect vehicle for the elite to use to bring in their version of utopia, because just about every possible form of human activity affects the environment in some way. Ultimately, they hope to centrally plan and strictly regulate virtually everything that we do, and we will be told what is necessary that it is necessary to save the planet. Absolutely, exactly what is going on. They'll never come out, the article says, and call it a new world order, because sustainable development sounds so much nicer and is so much more acceptable to the general population. Needless to say, there wouldn't be much room for individual liberty, none, in fact, freedom or anything else of the kind. In fact, the UN's #1 sustainable development official has essentially publicly admitted this by saying this is probably the most difficult task we have ever given ourselves, which is to intentionally transform the economic development model for the first time in human history. This is the first time in the history of mankind, he says, that we are setting ourselves the task of intentionally, within a defined period of time, as quick as possible, change the economic development model that has been reigning for at least 150 years since the Industrial Revolution, the post-industrial society. And the article quotes another guy, Paul Maguire, co-author of a book called The Babylon Code, Solving the Bible's Greatest End Times Mystery, who says this: deep inside every man and woman is the longing for a far better world, a world without war, disease, death, and pain. Our present world is a cruel world in which every life ends in death. From the beginning of time, mankind has sought to use science and technology to create a perfect world, what some would call utopia or paradise. As the human race began to organize itself, a scientific or technocratic elite arose to power by promising the masses that they could build this perfect world. Ancient Babylon represented the first historical attempt to build paradise on earth. In ancient times, the quote says, Babylon was the first attempt to create a type of global government, and ever since then the global elite have been trying to recreate the Babylon model. The promise is always the same. The elite swear that they have finally figured out how to create a perfect society without poverty or war. But in the end, all of these attempts at utopia always end up degenerating into extreme forms of tyranny. Absolutely the case. And what Agenda 2030, Agenda 21 are about is taking that onto a global level. And this scientific or technocratic elite is the network of bloodlines that I've been exposing all these years. And the article goes on, actually bringing us back to Babylon. On September 25th, the Pope is traveling to New York to give the opening address at the conference where the 2030 agenda will be launched. He will be urging all of humanity to support what the UN is trying to do. There are countless millions that implicitly trust the Pope, and they will buy what he is selling hook, line and sinker. And who is the Pope? The Pope is the head of the Roman Church. And what is the Roman Church? It is the, as I show in the books, it is the Church of Babylon relocated. It's just been going on and on and on, century after century, constantly centralizing power until the power is in the hands of the very few on a global level. And we have what I call the global Hunger Games society. And the article finishes off, they want to fundamentally transform our planet, and the freedom that you are enjoying today is simply not acceptable. Freedom is being deleted by the day as well. To the elite, giving people freedom and liberty is dangerous because they believe it hurts the environment and causes societal chaos. No, it's dangerous because they want complete control of the human race. According to their way of thinking, the only way to have the kind of harmonious utopia that they are shooting for is to tightly regulate and control what everyone is thinking, saying and doing. Their solutions always involve more central planning and more control in their own hands. But it's not because they want a harmonious utopia, because they want a global fascist dictatorship. So just finish off to give you an idea of all the nonsense that's being spoken in terms of migration and wars in the Middle East. Here's a headline from this week on the RT website. Former CIA director Petraeus wants to use Al-Qaeda to fight ISIS. Oh dear. Former Army General and CIA Director David Petraeus has been urging US officials to consider using the Al-Qaeda-linked al-Nusra Front to fight ISIS in Syria. Petraeus has been discreetly urging US officials to consider using moderate, there are none, members of al-Nusra to fight Islamic State in Syria, citing four sources. The report cites four sources familiar with conversations, including one person who reportedly spoke to Petraeus directly. All these groups, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they're just vehicles to an end. And talking of ISIS, there's a story in the Independent newspaper in Britain this week. ISIS profits from destruction of antiquities by selling relics to dealers and then blowing up the buildings they come from to conceal evidence of looting. And it quotes a Lebanese-French archaeologist saying that in her experience, this is what is happening. Why is ISIS blowing to pieces the greatest artifacts in ancient history in Syria and Iraq? First, ISIS sells statues, stone faces and frescoes that international dealers demand. It takes the money, hands over the relics and blows up the temples and buildings they come from to conceal the evidence that that the looting has taken place. And why? What's the official reason that ISIS is blowing up these antiquities? Because they are somehow satanic and against God, when really they're selling them on. It's all a massive hoax. It sells something priceless, or it has something priceless to sell, and then afterwards it destroys the site, and the destruction is meant to hide the level of theft. It destroys the evidence, so no one knows what is taken beforehand nor what was destroyed. Do you remember what happened in Iraq when they went in to Iraq and all the museums were looted while American troops looked on? Just an ongoing story. And this other one is 9 of Syria and Iraq's 10 World Heritage Sites are in danger as ISIS ravages centuries of history. So we've come a long way in this video cast from migrants going into Europe and the tragic picture of a little boy on a beach. But it's all connected. They're all elements in the same story. And only by seeing the picture, by connecting the dots, can we see what's really going on. And if we see every dot in isolation, they'll play us like a stringed instrument. See you next week.